Good evening, everyone. I'm Jenny Hofschulte, and I work with the Wisconsin Public Education Network, and I'm also a mother of a fifth grader. I feel like everybody's been on pause since the spring. A fifth grader in Milwaukee Public Schools. I'm very pleased to be here tonight just to lend a little bit of a parent perspective, and I also learned a lot from the previous two presenters. So at the Wisconsin Public Education Network, we are really digging in right now in how we're supporting children and caregivers during the time of COVID and trying to understand the big scope of everything, the pressures that start from the federal level and come all the way down. Next, Christina, please. So starting with the Public Education Network, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy coalition that are all over the state. And we take actions to promote strong and excellent public schools and help communities build the schools that all children deserve. And that's important in this moment because a lot of times we love our public schools, but when we take them for granted a little bit. And then when something like this happens, we're all scrambling to figure out how we can work together. So we're trying to promote this working together for our excellent schools year round with or without pandemics. Next. So as you can see, we have local groups all over the state of Wisconsin that are working regionally to help promote their public schools. And we work together to take statewide action. So everything from hosting events around the state, learning sessions such as this with our partners such as WEAC, and then also helping people connect with their lawmakers. As you can see in the lower right-hand corner, that's encouraging people to speak up at a public hearing, but we also encourage people to speak up on their micro level a little bit, and that's where we're kind of coming into this conversation tonight. Next. So Christina, may I have you just advance 2 slides, and we're just going to do these 3 backwards. So are the schools okay? Funding in Wisconsin is a very complicated matter for our public schools, and now with the COVID situation, everything is extra uncertain. So our state and federal money is up in the air. Our school counts from Third Friday. We had a lot of students under-report to school for the first days of school. Very low counts in the state of Wisconsin for our kindergartners and some of our youngest learners. We've had some pitfalls with our assessments. Some districts performing assessments, others not performing the standardized assessments, and just how to do that with any efficacy in this world we're in right now is tricky. And everyone's kind of figuring it out as we go along. And the closure guidance has been in some ways erratic. Districts are up to their own devices, which is confusing for families. And the other thing we have to consider is everything in the COVID world is expensive. So even in the districts that are virtual, a lot of people think they're saving a lot of money by being virtual, but in reality, it's very expensive to be virtual too. And there's just been a huge lift of how we train teachers such as Betsy and Jamie on these platforms in order to give kids the education they deserve in this strange time. Next slide back, one back. So are the adults okay? Our educators are having humongous workloads now. Administrators are burdened with making public health decisions. Our school boards are feeling pressured from everywhere. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, I'm feeling completely overwhelmed and overloaded all the time. One more back. And that brings us to the kids. So here are some things that we have been finding around the state that are working for people, and just some tips for you to support your learner at home and in a way that helps support our teachers and educators too. So right now, the closures are disproportionately impacting students of color, people on the lower end of the socioeconomic standpoint. These are gap widening moments. The pros and cons are being weighed between virtual and in-person. Again, with the assessments and being able to assess how our children are doing is really difficult. We're still thinking about things in a progression of a normal, typical in-person day-to-day education versus thinking about it in this new way. And a lot of people are expecting things to be very much like in-person schooling when it's not that way at all in the virtual space. So things that we've really been encouraging people to focus on is their children's social, emotional, and mental health. We're encouraging parents to really talk to their children, ask for the highlights of the day. I know I can get really bogged into just going into Google Classroom and checking that list of things, but maybe I need to take more time to listen to how our son's day went and what they might need help with, instead of focusing so much on things that are missing for them academically. We really have worked hard to set reasonable expectations for ourselves. You know, it's hard to have a long attention span on the screen for adults, and it's even harder for our children, especially when they're not, when they're missing so much of the interaction with their friends and their peers and their teachers and just those personal check-ins. So of setting a reasonable expectation for each other. And then discussing screen time. I know I initially heard some educators and some administrators say things like, well, if kids were just on their video games, they're on screens all the time, so parents shouldn't, you know, push back or advocate about screen time against so much screen time during the academic day. But just knowing that some of it's very different interaction, right? Like our kids want to see each other. You know, our son talks to his friends a lot over his video game system, and sometimes the best laughter I've heard from him is in those moments. That maybe I would have squashed that amount of video game time, but he really needs that connection with his friends. For other things that we were like noticing with parents and teachers and sort of getting in the feedback loop is like on the practical side of being just honest and gracious with your feedback. To the point that I think it was Betsy was making about wanting to know when Infinite Campus or is updated. You know, our teachers are really pushing hard to make this work the best they can. So when they open up their email, if it's just a million questions that maybe don't have like a check-in or a nicety around it, those little niceties go a long way of just saying like, I know, I just would like to point this out to you. It's okay if you get back to me in a day or so. And I'm sort of leaving that door open so they don't feel the pressure to respond immediately. That's going to help with the kids learning too, because it's going to help foster those better interactions. We've been encouraging parents to really explore the tools and have your child give you a tour of the tools. So when I see it through my son's eyes, it really shows me where he might be getting tripped up and how to help him advocate those questions. But also it helps me understand where to find things and what the assignments even look like. You know, one of the frustrating parts for me this whole time is like, I feel like I never know what's actually going on, no matter how hard I try to know what's going on. And then the other thing that I would like to point out to parents, it's sort of those extreme buckets, like parents that are like hovering and on top of everything. And then there's the parents who have hardly checked on anything. And I find myself going back and forth between both of those parenting styles. But the overcorrecting your child, like right now, parents and guardians have a real lens and moment here where they really can see what their children are doing. And instead of really sanitizing and overcorrecting the things that your children are working on, when we overcorrect, you know, edit things for our children, it really hinders the teacher's ability to see where our kids really are at. So letting them make mistakes so that it can be seen by the teacher and the teacher will know what direction to go with it. It's okay to allow those mistakes to happen. Children will start to internalize that they can't do things for themselves if we're always doing it for them. I like to call it a productive struggle. You know, if they're kind of, if he's kind of wiggling on something, I don't want him to totally demoralize over it, but I also want him to know that he can find solutions for himself. He can guide himself to those answers. And then also just approaching the teacher with your student as a total team. Like we need teamwork in this moment more than ever before. We're relying on one another. Teachers are relying on parents in ways they've never had to before, and parents are getting insights into what the day of the teacher looks like never before. And the last thing I want to tell you is that you're not alone in this at all. I have not yet met a parent that's like, this is a piece of cake, no worries. I've met a lot of parents that are on the verge of tears about it, you know, many times over. So you are not alone. You can reach out to your school's support network, to your teacher for guidance. The guidance counseling teams in the districts are doing a really great job, I think, of pulling together some social emotional tips and opportunities. So reach out and take advantage of some of those other things as they come up. But just know that you're not alone in this and that we all need to be really gracious with one another. And Christina, do you want mind throwing up my last slide here? I'm trying to keep on my time. So I just want to leave you with these contact information here with the Wisconsin Public Education Network. We are all our first name at the Wisconsin Network, or at Wisconsin Network, and we want to hear from families and teachers about how things are going. We want to know how we can advocate together to be better assistance to one another. And we definitely have tools and people in your region that we can hook you up with. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to connect with other people on the grassroots.